You're listening to Media History Podcast.
where stories echo beyond the headlines.
What's the real price, the human price of bearing witness? I mean, what happens when you take that photo, the one image that changes the world, but it ends up destroying you, the person behind the lens?
That's really the heart of Kevin Carter's story, isn't it? That exact tension. The immense power of a photograph versus the deep vulnerability of the person who takes it. He won a Pulitzer, a truly gifted but, complicated photographer.
Mm-hmm.
His work captured the final brutal moments of apartheid, but also the sheer devastation of famine.
Welcome, everyone, to the Media History Podcast. We're diving into the life, the legacy, and, the heavy ethical burden of Kevin Carter today. This analysis comes from some fantastic reporting we found in the online weekly magazine, Reporterzy.info.
And our goal here really is to look beyond just that one famous controversial photograph.
Mm-hmm.
We want to understand the journey, from this dissident kid in apartheid South Africa to the center of this global ethical storm. How his camera became his weapon, but one that kind of backfired.
Okay, so let's set the scene. South Africa, 1960s. Apartheid wasn't just segregation. It was like two entirely separate realities forced together. It controlled everything where you lived, your education, even who you could marry. Total separation.
And Carter was born right into the privileged side of that divide. 1960 Parkmore Whites Only District.
Mm-hmm.
His parents, Jimmy and Roma, Irish Catholic immigrants. They were overtly racist, apparently, but they took this stance of careful neutrality.
Yeah.
Didn't actively fight the system.
And that neutrality, that sitting on the fence, seems to be where Kevin's internal conflict started. He just couldn't square his comfortable life with the injustice he saw all around him. Led to a lot of unhappiness, arguments at home. He was wired differently from the start, it seems.
Yeah, nonconformist. And in South Africa back then, non-conforming, that had immediate, often physical consequences. He dropped out of pharmacy school, got drafted into the army in 1977.
Right.
And there's this incident the sources highlight. He tried to stick up for some black mess hall staff. The result, his own comrades beat him up, called him Kaffir Booty, which is a really nasty slur, basically friend of blacks, meant to isolate and punish him.
That's incredibly harsh. And trauma like that, it sticks with you. It clearly played a part in him deserting the army in 1980. Then came this sort of drift, a failed attempt at being a DJ in Durban, even a suicide attempt.
Yeah, a really rough patch. He did go back to finish his service, but then he was injured in the 1983 Church Street bombing in Pretoria. Just seemed caught up in the era's violence.
But then things shifted. He started working in a photography shop in Johannesburg, looking for direction maybe, and he found it, the camera.
Exactly. It started small, shooting sports on weekends for the Johannesburg Sunday Express. But it clicked. By 1984, he's working full-time at the Star.
So photography wasn't just a career path, it became his personal mission, his way of fighting back against the system he hated.
Precisely. It became his weapon against the apartheid state, against the injustice that had troubled him since he was a kid. He didn't just dip his toes in. He dived right into the heart of the conflict zones.
And what's striking is his focus. He wasn't trying to capture, moments of hope or reconciliation. He was documenting the raw brutality. Street riots, police violence, the horrific ethnic clashes between Zulu and Xhosa groups.
Which immediately put him in these impossible ethical positions.
Yeah.
The source mentions in 1985 specifically, Carter was the first photographer to document a necklacing.
God, that's horrific. A tire filled with gasoline put around someone's neck and set on fire.
Yes. The victim was Maki Skosana, and Carter wrestled with it intensely. Should he publish something so gruesome? Does it just exploit the victim, humiliate them?
What did he conclude?
He felt the images, however brutal, did more good than harm. He actually said something like, "I was horrified, but then people started talking about those images. I felt that maybe my actions weren't so wrong." He believed the shock value was necessary to force people, especially the outside world, to confront the reality.
That's a heavy burden to carry, deciding that. And the danger was constant, right? Especially by 1990, with the ANC and Inkatha Freedom Party conflict escalating. Working alone was becoming suicidal.
Absolutely. That's when the group dynamic really formed. He teamed up with Ken Oosterbrook, Greg Marinovich, and João Silva. They became this sort of tight-knit unit trying to cover the escalating violence, the torture, the suffering in the townships like Soweto and Thokoza. They needed each other for safety and probably for sanity, too.
And that's how the Bang Bang Club got its name.
Well, initially, Living Magazine called them the Bang Bang Paparazzi in '92. They hated the paparazzi part, felt it trivialized what they were doing. They insisted they were documenting history, not chasing celebrities, so they kept the Bang Bang part a pretty grim reflection of their daily soundtrack, really, and became the Bang Bang Club.
But living with that level of constant violence, seeing those horrors day in, day out, it takes a toll, a massive toll.
Oh, absolutely. The source material is quite clear about the dark side of their camaraderie. Coping mechanisms involved a lot of alcohol, and drugs too. Marijuana, or daga, as it's known there, sometimes mixed with mandrax, which is a banned sedative. They called it white pipe. Carter, especially, often told friends that the things he was seeing were literally killing him inside. It was this shared trauma and shared destructive escape.
It's chilling. That bond forged in danger also involved this shared self-medication. And then you add the professional pressure. Greg Marinovich wins the Pulitzer in 1992 for that photo of Lindsay Shabala being beaten. That must have just cranked up the pressure on the others, including Carter.
Definitely raised the stakes. It showed their work could get that kind of global recognition, that it wasn't just about documenting for South Africa, but for the world. And maybe that recognition, that pressure, played a part in what happened next.
Which leads us to Sudan, March 1993. Carter and João Silva went there at the request of Operation Lifeline Sudan. They needed someone to document the famine, the impact of the rebels' actions.
Yeah, and Carter wanted that assignment badly. He took leave from his job at the Weekly Mail, even had to borrow money for the plane ticket. He felt he needed to be there.
Describe the scene when he got there. Ajad, the food distribution point.
It was overwhelming, just unimaginable suffering. The sources say Carter was so shaken by the sight of all the starving, dying people that he actually had to walk away from the main feeding area for a bit just to try and collect himself in the bush.
And that's when it happened, the photo.
That's when it happened. He saw this tiny child, emaciated, crawling towards the feeding station. Initially, everyone thought it was a girl, and then this vulture lands nearby, just lands there.
Oh my God.
Carter started taking photos. Apparently, he waited for maybe 20 minutes, hoping the vulture would spread its wings for a more dramatic shot.
Yeah.
It didn't. He took his pictures, then chased the bird away.
And that image, the vulture and the little girl, hit the New York Times on March 26, 1993. The impact was immediate, right?
Instantaneous. It became the global symbol of famine in Africa overnight. It undeniably spurred a huge wave of humanitarian aid. Donations poured in. But at the same time, the ethical backlash against Carter was just as intense.
People were furious. The question everyone was asking was, why take the picture? Why didn't you drop the camera and help the child? Were you just a cold observer?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that question absolutely tormented him. But the context, which often got lost in the immediate visceral reaction, is so important here. First, photographers and aid workers were strongly advised not to touch famine victims because of the high risk of transmitting diseases which could be fatal to them.
Okay, that's a critical point.
And another key piece. Leslie Marianne Neal, who was also there, confirmed Carter was surrounded by armed Sudanese soldiers at the time. They were there to prevent interference. Trying to intervene directly could have been incredibly dangerous for him and potentially for others. It might have stopped him taking any photos at all.
Right, photos that ultimately did galvanize aid. And there's another crucial correction the source points out.
Yes, very important. The child wasn't a girl. It was a boy named Kong Young. And there's the vital part. He survived that moment.
He survived.
He did. Nurses later confirmed he reached the feeding center. He had a UN food station bracelet on his wrist, code T3. T meant severe malnutrition, 3 meant it was his third visit. So he made it. He survived the famine.
That changes the narrative significantly.
It does. Tragically, Kong Young died much later, in 2007, about 14 years later, from a fever, unrelated to the famine depicted in the photo. But he survived the vulture.
But that context, that nuance, it came too late for Carter, didn't it? The public criticism was brutal. He got hate mail. People called him Vulture Man.
Right.
Winning the Pulitzer for that very photo in April 1994 must have felt incredibly complicated.
Deeply ironic, yeah. It brought professional validation, eased his financial worries for a moment. He signed with the big Sigma agency. But internally, the guilt, the nerves, they were still there. And then things just started to unravel quickly.
What happened?
A series of devastating blows. March 1994, back in South Africa, covering the violence in Bophuthatswana. He photographed these far-right AWB members after they'd shot civilians and been wounded themselves. But then, his film ran out. Right at the moment, a Bophuthatswana police officer walked up and executed the wounded men point blank.
He missed the shot.
He missed the defining shot. For a photographer like Carter, that was a massive professional failure in his own eyes. Huge frustration.
And then something even worse.
Just days after hearing he'd won the Pulitzer in April '94, his closest friend in the Bang Bang Club, Ken Oosterbrook, was killed by friendly fire while covering clashes in Thakosa.
Oh, no.
Carter was absolutely devastated. He was nearby when it happened. Survivor's guilt hit him hard. He reportedly felt that he should have been the one hit, that Ken didn't deserve to die.
That combination, the accumulated trauma, the professional pressure, the guilt, now losing his best friend.
It was becoming unbearable. His work for Sigma started suffering. Photos were late, maybe not his best quality. Debts were piling up again, rent, child support. And then the final straw, it seems, was almost mundane by comparison. Mid-July 1994, returning from an assignment in Mozambique, he lost some rolls of exposed film. Just misplaced them on the flight or somewhere.
After everything else, that was it.
That seemed to be the breaking point. On July 27, 1994, Kevin Carter drove his pickup truck to the Field and Study Center in Parkmore, a place he used to play in as a child. He ran a hose from the exhaust pipe into the cab. He was 33 years old.
Just devastating.
His suicide note. It's incredibly painful to read. It speaks directly to that burden we talked about. He wrote, "The pain of life overrides the joy to the point that joy does not exist." And then, "I am haunted by the vivid memories of killings and corpses and anger and pain, of starving or wounded children, of trigger-happy madmen, often police, of killer executioners." He finished by saying, "I've gone to join Ken if I am that lucky."
He leaves behind this legacy, though. Thousands of powerful photos. The story of the Bang Bang Club, captured in books and films. And there's a foundation in his name now, isn't there?
Yes, supporting emerging photojournalists. Crucially, it also emphasizes providing mental health support, acknowledging the immense risks involved in this kind of work, the risk of secondary trauma from witnessing such events.
It circles back to that Sudanese proverb sometimes mentioned with his work. Those who have not seen evil cannot appreciate the good. But Carter's story forces that harder question.
What is the obligation? Observer or participant? When does the camera stop being a tool and start being a shield that prevents you from acting as a human being? There's no easy answer.
No, there isn't. Kevin Carter's life is a stark reminder that the history of media, especially conflict reporting, is often etched in trauma, not just for the subjects, but for the storytellers too. The weight can become unbearable. Thank you for joining us on the Media History Podcast.
See you soon. And stay curious.